velocity. Keep bombing retaliation. Deterrence is a bomb. A nuclear bomb more efficient than all the explosives expended in World War II. Deterrence is a vehicle, an airplane or a missile to deliver the bomb if ever we must. Deterrence is, in fact, the cornerstone of our national policy. If the enemy moves against us, he must know that nothing can prevent us from destroying every target of strategic significance within his borders. But deterrence is also a race. We strive ceaselessly to keep our retaliatory capabilities superior to the enemy's defenses. Traditionally, this has meant building our missiles and airplanes to go higher and faster and farther. But today, deterrence has a new dimension. This is the story of a B-58 called Little Joe, number 22, a flying machine that mocks enemy defenses. A bomber that strikes from the stratosphere at twice the speed of sound, or snakes under the enemy radar defenses at almost the speed of sound. A formidable new bomb carrier with a high-low retaliatory punch. At Carswell Air Force Base in Texas, crewmen are preparing Little Joe for an unprecedented test. As bombers go, the B-58 is small. It needs only 3 men. One to fly the plane and command the mission, a second to plot the route and drop the bomb, and a third to man electronic devices that confuse and bewilder enemy interception. It takes the same crew, just 3 men, whether the attack is launched at double sonic speed 10 miles over the target, or, like today's job, shaving the earth at 700 miles an hour. This standard B-58 Hustler from the Fort Worth production line of Convair Division of General Dynamics today is scheduled to fly 1,400 miles across 4 states at never more than 500 feet above the ground and at just under sonic speed. Hustler number 22 picks up speed. The nose wheel retracts to uncover the eye of a movie camera installed in the bomb pod under the fuselage. The runway slips away as the Delta Wing bomber lifts off and climbs quickly to its 500-foot cruising altitude. The target is Edwards Air Force Base in California's Mojave Desert. Little Joe is to penetrate an enemy radar net, fly underneath the probing electronic eyes that sweep the skies. But radar can't look through mountains or below the horizon. The B-58 already has demonstrated it can drop a bomb pod without interception from more than 10 miles up, while flying at twice the speed of a .45 caliber bullet. Today, Little Joe must prove that the B-58 can double as a hedge-hopping attack weapon, that it can take the low-level buffeting, the violent downdrafts over the mountains, the desert thermals that chop up the air. Soon after takeoff, Little Joe attains its assigned speed of 610 knots, more than 700 miles an hour, just a few feet behind the sound from its own Ford jet engines. The plan calls for a non-refueled 1,400-mile low-level flight to the west coast. Little Joe will hug the flat terrain of North Texas. It will rise to elevations as high as 9,000 feet as it skims over southern New Mexico, Arizona, and California mountains, but never more than 500 feet off the ground, with the return home to be flown at about 40,000 feet. Little Joe must prove the B-58 airframe can take it, and that the crew can take it too, without being jolted and shaken beyond human endurance, without becoming disoriented by the dizzying strain of holding the airplane just 500 feet above the terrain at high speed. To record the flight, camera crews were spotted along the route. At places like Possum Kingdom Lake in northwest Texas. The B-58 comes in so low and so fast and passes so quickly, the ground cameramen get only 10 seconds of film, even though they know in advance where and when to look for Little Joe. The B-58 is undergoing its most rugged testing to date. How does it react? Smooth as a limousine through the turbulent air. A delta wing airplane flying at the same speed and weight as a swept or straight wing plane reacts less violently to rough air. The B-58 design proves itself as the bomber slips smoothly through thermals and updrafts over the mountains and valleys. Yet all the time, Little Joe holds its airspeed of 700 miles an hour, its altitude of not more than 500 feet above ground. Farther out in the mountains of West Texas, another camera crew waits. Little Joe approaches at nearly the speed of sound. It can't be heard on the ground until it's almost overhead because it keeps up with its own sound. This means the B-58 can attack with surprise and escape with certainty. A defender hasn't time to react. That's the sound of a B-58 jet bomber, intense while passing directly overhead. 2 miles away, its characteristic jet whoosh is barely noticeable. Over south-central New Mexico, the pilot drops the B-58 down to 200 feet to check for bug splash on the windshield. But bugs are no problem. They rarely get through the wind that sweeps around the streamlined windshield. Back up at 500 feet altitude, Little Joe continues its race for the target. Cruising over desert mountains or flatlands with hardly a bump. The B-58 wing is a rigid, closely coupled, compact structure. There is little flexing of a delta under the varying loads of updrafts and downdrafts. A delta simply doesn't react to rough air. The B-58 gets its strength from its multiple spar wing construction. There are dozens of horizontal spars in each side of the wing. They spread the loads, making the delta wing a strong, rigid structure. And bonus strength with minimum weight comes from a principle borrowed from the honeybee, the honeycomb. Honeycomb cells of metal or fiberglass sandwiched between metal skins. Honeycomb panels cover the wing and most of the body surface of the B-58. Make it light, strong, rigid, able to take the stresses of low-level flight. For this test, the pilot flies by dead reckoning. He checks his course by such visual landmarks as Parker Reservoir on the California-Arizona border. But in spite of the prolonged flight at low level, even with eyes fixed on the ground, the pilot feels no dizziness, no undue eye strain. The men perform their jobs quickly, easily, and efficiently, though they had no special training for this mission. There's no severe shaking or jolting to exhaust them. Little Joe sweeps along, lifting over slight rises, skimming the desert floor as the plane speeds toward its simulated target. Powered flight controls make it easy for the B-58 pilot to maneuver the bomber with precision and safety. Effortless control and positive reaction come at a touch. Turns and dives are kept automatically within stress limits. Crewmen know the G-forces will always be tolerable. Little Joe snakes through the screening mountains of California, ready to sweep down unnoticed and unannounced on the target, Edwards Air Force Base near Los Angeles. Target dead ahead. The knockout punch, the nuclear payload in the long pod slung below the B-58's body, would be dropped now if this were an enemy installation. Now it's evasive action as Little Joe heads for the coast and the cover of heavy fog and clouds. Little Joe, the head-chopping B-58, still hugs the ground and then climbs swiftly to return to cruising altitude of about 40,000 feet, still far below its maximum operating ceiling. The ride home is routine and uneventful. A limousine trip. No physical problems, no psychological disturbances, sense of reality normal, no tunnel vision or excessive fatigue. In fact, it's a flight any hustler crew can make without special training or equipment. Others have done it since in other B-58s. The flight's almost over. Home field, Carswell Air Force Base, coming up. Mission accomplished. A round trip of 2,632 miles. 1,400 of them at not more than 500 feet off the deck. Total flight time, 4 hours and 3 minutes. The first long, low-level bombing run at anything like these speeds. Only a couple of days later, the same airplane with the same equipment and the same crew made a typical high-altitude penetration bombing run on Dallas, begun over a Pacific Northwest city, streaking 1,680 miles in just 80 minutes. Yes, the Air Force's B-58 Hustler bomber has proved it can take on any fighting job, clipping treetops at almost sonic speed, taking advantage of radar's inability to see through mountains or below the horizon. So fast, at low altitude, it's almost invisible. So fast, there's no time for the enemy to set his guard up. Or in the stratosphere at Mach 2, so high and so fast, the chance of enemy interception is marginal. This is the Air Force Hustler, America's only supersonic bomber. A nimble craft that can be dispersed and flown off 370 air bases in the United States and allied areas. A first-line weapon for high-speed penetration of enemy defenses. On the deck or over the clouds. A double threat deterrent for the Strategic Air Command.